A Vietnam veteran was invited to share his story in school, but some parents called him a danger. They said he might have PTSD, that he didn't belong near students. The school nearly canceled his visit, but then something incredible happened. A group of teenagers stood up, spoke out, and reminded the whole town what honor really means. This is a true story, and it just might restore your faith. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Janice Reynolds had been teaching history at Clearwater High School for over 2 decades. She'd seen students come and go generations with different slang, different shoes, different distractions. But one thing stayed the same: their need to understand the world beyond textbooks. That's why she started the Living History Week. Once a year, she invited real people with real stories to speak to her juniors. Not just veterans, refugees, civil rights leaders, factory workers, people who had lived through the chapters she taught. This year, she wanted them to meet Robert Miller, a soft-spoken man of 68 with a gentle face and quiet presence. He wasn't the kind to boast, but there was a certain weight behind his eyes. She first met him at a local community cleanup. He had been planting trees with a group of volunteers, mostly teenagers who didn't know a shovel from a rake. Robert helped them patiently, smiling like a proud grandfather, never once raising his voice. After the event, she asked for his background. That's when he told her, almost as a side note, that he had served in Vietnam Marine Recon, Khe Sanh, 1968. Janice had paused. That wasn't just war. That was the edge of hell. He didn't like to talk about it. But when she explained the program at school, how it wasn't about glorifying war, but honoring experience, he agreed. "I'll share what I can," he said. For the kids, at first everything moved smoothly. The school newsletter featured his upcoming visit. Janice worked with students to prepare questions. She even reserved the main auditorium, expecting a good crowd. Then the email started. One came late on a Thursday evening. It was from a parent she didn't recognize, accusing the school of inviting a potential threat. The message claimed veterans like Mr. Miller had untreated PTSD and could snap at any moment. Janice stared at the screen, stunned. She thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the next morning, 2 more emails arrived, then 6. One called him a failed soldier. Another said, "Why are we letting war into our children's classroom?" One parent demanded the event be canceled before someone gets hurt. The tone wasn't just concerned. It was laced with fear, suspicion, even contempt. It was as if they believed Mr. Miller carried violence in his shadow. Janice felt sick. She had taught about prejudice in history. She'd seen bias rear its head in the news. But this was happening in her own hallway, against a man she knew to be kind and calm. She brought the issue to the principal's office. He listened, nodded, then sighed. "There's some concern," he said carefully. "We may need to reconsider the visit." Reconsider. It was the polite way of saying back down. Avoid trouble. Keep the peace. "But he's not dangerous," Janice said. "He spent years mentoring youth. He volunteers at the food pantry. He never even raises his voice." The principal glanced at the folder on his desk: letters, printed emails, board policies. "We just want to avoid backlash," he replied. "You know how quickly things go viral." Janice left the room in disbelief. Her hands were trembling. Not from anger, at least not yet. It was heartbreak. The kind that creeps in when people abandon what's right for what's easy. She walked out to the faculty lot that afternoon, passing by a mural painted by students the year before. It showed hands holding a flag, a tribute to those who served. She'd helped design that project. Now she wondered if anyone even remembered what it meant. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone. She debated calling Mr. Miller to tell him, to warn him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she thought back to the tree planting day, how one boy had almost given up trying to dig through tough soil. Mr. Miller had knelt beside him, looked him in the eye, and then said gently, "Hard ground doesn't mean bad ground. It just means someone's got to try harder." Janice stared at her coffee. Maybe this was hard ground, but she wasn't ready to stop digging. She opened her laptop, typed out an email not to the administration this time, but to her students. If the adults wouldn't stand up for him, maybe the kids would. And somewhere, deep down, she believed they just might. The morning after the principal's meeting, Janice walked into her classroom feeling hollow. She'd barely slept. Her heart carried the weight of something deeper than disappointment. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that something had already started moving. It happened right after third period. She was erasing the board when she heard a soft knock at the door. It was Emily Carter. Emily wasn't loud or flashy. She sat near the back of the room, always took notes, and asked questions others were too shy to ask. But today, her eyes were steady focused. "Miss Reynolds," she said, "is it true about Mr. Miller?" Janice paused, marker in hand. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to let her voice shake. "Yes," she said quietly. "There's pressure to cancel." Emily's jaw tightened. "My dad served in Kandahar," she said. "He had PTSD. He still made pancakes for me every Sunday. This isn't right." There was a long silence between them. Then Emily asked, "Can I do something?" Janice didn't know what that meant, but she nodded anyway. "Yes, please." That afternoon, Emily called 3 of her friends. By evening, they had a name: Sharks Honor Our Vets. They set up a campaign page on Instagram, added a photo of Mr. Miller smiling beside the flag mural. They shared the truth, that he was a volunteer, a mentor, a man with a story worth hearing. They wrote, "We don't cancel people for serving this country." The post got 50 likes in an hour, then 100, then 300. By midnight, it had spread to neighboring schools. Some students began posting their own stories. "My uncle served in Iraq. He never told me anything until I asked. My grandpa was in Vietnam too. He never got welcomed home." The next day, Janice opened her inbox. It was full this time with messages from students, alumni, even strangers, all asking one thing: is Mr. Miller still coming? Emily didn't stop there. She organized a letter-writing drive during lunch. Dozens of students wrote handwritten notes addressed to the principal. They stacked the letters on his desk, each one signed, folded neatly. Some were just one sentence: "He deserves to be heard." Others were longer, recalling the veteran relatives they never got to meet. Then came the gathering. It started small, just a few students, sitting outside the school courtyard after class. They carried note cards with names written in black ink. Names of veterans from Clearwater who had died in service. One by one, they stood up and read them aloud. A name, a rank, the war, the age. Each name echoed through the courtyard like a quiet bell. Janice stood at the edge, hands in her coat pockets. She didn't say a word. She just watched. Some teachers joined, some didn't. But the kids showed up. By Friday, even the local newspaper caught wind of it. A photographer came, snapping pictures of the name cards taped to lockers. The headline the next morning read, "Students Rally to Defend Local Veteran." Not everyone was pleased. A few parents continued to protest, sent follow-up emails demanding neutrality, but their voices began to feel smaller. Janice waited until the weekend to visit Mr. Miller. She found him where he always waited, on the bench near Route 6 beside the old bus stop. He wore a windbreaker and the same watch she'd seen during the tree planting. She sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. Then he said, "I heard." His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, familiar, like someone who had seen this kind of rejection before. "I'm used to being forgotten," he added softly. Janice looked at him, really looked, at the lines carved into his face, at the stillness in his hands. "You're not forgotten," she said. "Not by them." He nodded slowly. "I've seen what war does. I just didn't expect it to follow me into a high school gym." She let that sit, then reached into her bag and handed him a folded piece of paper. It was one of the student letters written in blue ink, messy cursive. It read, Dear Mr. Miller, we want to hear you. You matter. His hands trembled slightly as he held it. He didn't cry, but he stared at the letter for a long time. Then he tucked it into his jacket pocket, like it belonged there. Tell them, he said finally. Tell the kids. I'll be there. Janice smiled, not because the fight was over, but because it had begun with them. The approval came late on a Monday afternoon. It wasn't a celebration, just a short email from the principal with a single line, Mr. Miller's talk will proceed. Wednesday, 10:01 a.m., auditorium, understaff supervision. Janice exhaled slowly as she read it. No apology, no recognition, but still, it was a yes. She forwarded the email to Emily, who responded within minutes. Understood. We'll be ready. And they were. On Tuesday, students stayed after school to finish posters. They printed programs that read Clearwater High welcomes, Mr. Robert Miller. At the bottom, in bold, it said, thank you for your service. They printed 200 copies. By 9:55 a.m. Wednesday, all of them were gone. The auditorium filled quietly, row by row. There was no music, no fanfare, just the shuffle of feet and the soft whisper of paper. Teachers stood along the walls, some watching cautiously, others curiously. Janice sat in the front row, heart steady but hands clasped tight. Beside her, Emily looked straight ahead, holding the folded artwork they had made for Mr. Miller. Neither said a word. Then, the side door opened. Mr. Miller stepped into the room wearing a dark blazer and slacks, both a little worn but clean and pressed. Pinned to his lapel was a small bronze eagle. No medals, no rank, just a man. The room went still. Some students looked unsure. A few teachers exchanged glances. But most eyes stayed on him, watchful, waiting. He walked slowly toward the podium, his steps even, but deliberate. As he reached the microphone, he paused, then leaned in just slightly. I'm not here to talk about war, he said. I'm here to talk about what it took to come home. The words landed like a pin drop in a silent church. No one moved. No one dared to. He told them about Khe-Sanh, about the mud that never dried, the days that bled into nights. He spoke of Lance Corporal Dennis Boyd, his best friend who didn't make it past March. He took my place on a patrol that day, Mr. Miller said. He laughed when he did it, told me I needed sleep more than he needed glory. His voice didn't crack, but his hands wrapped around the podium, held tight. He told them about the plane ride back, the silence in the airport, the protest signs, how for years he avoided crowds not because he feared them, but because they feared him. I spent the next 3 decades trying not to talk about it. He said, then one day, a kid asked me if I ever saw anyone get hurt. I said yes. He looked toward the students, and then he asked, did they matter? A hush settled like a blanket over the room. A girl near the middle wiped her cheek with her sleeve. A boy lowered his head, biting his lip. I want you to know, Mr. Miller continued, every name on a memorial, every pair of boots left behind, every folded flag, they mattered. He stepped back from the mic. He didn't need a dramatic ending. The silence said enough. The auditorium didn't erupt into applause. Instead, there was stillness, a reverent, unspoken pause. And then, quietly, one by one, they stood, not because someone told them to, but because they knew they should, even the teachers. Emily walked forward, holding the painting. It was hand-drawn an American flag, soft red and blue, with the words, "Thank you for your service," signed by over 100 students. She held it out with both hands. Mr. Miller looked at it like it was something fragile. He didn't speak. He just reached out and touched the paper. Then he nodded. Janice watched from her seat, eyes stinging. He was still the same man, still quiet, still standing straight. But something had changed. He turned to face the room once more. And for a brief moment, his lips curled into the smallest smile, not of pride, not of victory, but of being seen. And just like that, the door that had nearly been shut was open. The morning after the assembly, Clearwater High felt different. The halls weren't louder, the bells didn't ring any faster, but there was a stillness in the air that hadn't been there before. Someone taped the student artwork beside the main office door. Others reposted videos from the event on social media. Clips of Mr. Miller's voice overlaid with the caption, "They mattered." By Friday, the story had reached the local newspaper. The headline read, "Clearwater Students Defend Vietnam, Veteran Against Backlash." And below it, a photo of Mr. Miller, mid-speech, hands at the podium, with rows of students standing behind him. Janice clipped the article and folded it carefully into a manila folder. She didn't say much about it, but she placed the folder at the front of her bookshelf just within reach. The following week, another school reached out, then two more. By the end of the month, Mr. Miller had spoken at 4 high schools across the county. Each time, he was introduced a little differently. At Clearwater, he had been a guest speaker. Now, he was being called Veteran Advocate and Youth Mentor. He never asked for that title, but he wore it with quiet grace. He always opened the same way, by naming someone else who didn't come home. It wasn't long before the local Veterans Council took notice. They invited him to consult on a program designed to bring veterans into classrooms, not as relics, but as living voices. Mr. Miller hesitated at first. "I'm not a teacher," he said, but the coordinator smiled. "Maybe not, but you've already taught more than most ever will." Emily and her friends stayed involved. They helped Mr. Miller launch a new initiative, Bridge Back Home, a student-led group that paired veterans with schools in need of mentorship. Their mission was simple connection, not just lectures, not just ceremonies, real human conversations. The first official Bridge Back Home meeting happened in a school library on a rainy afternoon. 12 students, 3 veterans, coffee, cookies, and open hearts. One young boy asked, "Did you ever feel invisible?" Mr. Miller paused, then nodded. "For a long time," he said, "but not today." Word spread. A retired Air Force medic joined next, then a Navy corpsman. Soon, every school in the district had a Bridge Back Home liaison. Janice stayed behind the scenes. She helped where she could, writing grants, organizing guest visits. But mostly, she watched with quiet pride. She'd always believed in history, but now she saw it living, breathing, walking into classrooms and shaking hands with teenagers. History wasn't a textbook anymore. It had a face, a name, a voice. One morning, she arrived early to school and found something taped to her door. A note from Emily. It said, "Thank you for not giving up on him or on us." She read it twice, then slid it into her top drawer. It stayed there, just above the paper clips and lesson plans. Months passed. Mr. Miller continued speaking, connecting, listening. His voice grew stronger, not louder, but steadier. People began to recognize him at the grocery store, at the post office, at Sunday farmers markets. Not for his medals, but for his message. He never tried to become anything more than what he was, just a man who showed up and kept showing up. Then came the day of the flag ceremony. Clearwater High had always held one in May, just before Memorial Day. But this year, something was different. The students asked to rewrite the program. They wanted Mr. Miller to stand with them, not in the audience, not on the sidelines, but at the front. When he arrived, the school courtyard was already full. Students lined both sides of the flagpole, each holding a single paper flag. At the center, Emily stood holding the real one, folded into a perfect triangle. A hush fell as the music began. The anthem played not from speakers, but from a single trumpet, soft, unhurried. Then Emily stepped forward and handed Mr. Miller the flag. He accepted it with both hands. Then, with measured steps, walked to the base of the pole, and began unfolding it. Another student helped. Janice stood nearby, not saying a word. Together, they raised the flag, slowly, silently, until the red, white, and blue unfurled against the morning sky. Mr. Miller stepped back, placed his hand over his heart, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel out of place. Janice watched from a few feet away, her eyes misted. It wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about every name that had gone unheard, until now. That afternoon, as students returned to class, one freshman turned to Janice and asked, "Is he going to come back next year?" Janice smiled. "He'll always have a place here, and maybe that's how healing begins. Not with banners or speeches, but with quiet moments, with someone simply being seen." Mr. Miller never asked for recognition, but that day, under a sky just clear enough to see the flag wave gently, he finally received it. A belated thank you, but a real one. And sometimes that's enough.